In this lab, we are going to do the final procedures that are needed to complete your distance refraction sequence. So we're going to work on binocular balance, or distance equalization as it's also called, and the binocular subjective to best visual acuity. The key resources available to you are the videos that Dr. Hefner produced. He produced a video showing the binocular balance and BSBVA done on the manual phoropter. And then if you look on the Moodle page, you'll also see a link to a previous video that shows the procedures done on the automated phoropters as well. There are also videos that show the complete distance refraction, so now you have all the steps for that. There's one that shows it on the manual phoropter as well as one that shows it on the automated phoropters. And then the relevant sections in the lab manual are always going to be a good resource for you. After JCC, I need you to repeat the 20/40 blur and the monocular subjective to best visual acuity. This is because in order to get the best spherical component, we need to have the best axis and sill in place. After your second monocular subjective refinement, check VAs. This is because if your patient is unable to achieve equal visual acuity between their two eyes, we're going to rely on the monocular subjective with JCC as the baseline for their final prescription. Once you've done that, repeat 20/40 blur. Yes, it is the third time that you're going to do that. And then when they're blurred, you're going to dissociate the images using vertical prism. It's important to check which eye is seeing which image to confirm that you've done it correctly. In theory, you could dissociate the vision between the two eyes using any combination of prism to separate the images. In practice, though, it makes sense to do things a standard way and have a routine that you do the same way every time. It increases your efficiency, it eliminates much of the chance of making an error, and it's a nice standard that we can all stick to. So the standard we use is to put 3 diopters of base down prism in front of the right eye, 3 diopters of base up prism in front of the left eye, and then the patient will see the image from the right eye up and the image from the left eye down. It's important to have one eye occluded when you're setting up the prism so your patient doesn't start to feel nauseous. And then I let my patient know that I'm going to try and get them to see 2 images, and I open up the other eye. Once I've done that, both eyes are open, I confirm with the patient that they're seeing 2 images, and then I cover the right eye and ask them which image disappears, the top one or the bottom one. If they say the top one, then you know that your setup is correct. From there, I let my patient know that I'm aware that both of those images are blurry, and I ask my patient, even though both those images are blurry, is one any clearer than the other? If they report one of the images clearer than the other, you're going to add a 1/4 diopter of plus in front of that clearer image, and that will make it more blurry. The goal of the test is to get the images equally blurred. It really helps my patient to know what my goal is here. Once you've added the 1/4 diopter plus in front of the clearer image, ask your patient again, now which image is clearer, the top or the bottom? And then whichever one they say is clearer, you're going to add a 1/4 diopter of minus in front of the other image. So you're now trying to get the blurrier image more clear. And you're going to continue to do that, adding a 1/4 diopter plus in front of the clearer image and a 1/4 diopter of minus in front of the blurrier image, back and forth until you get a reversal. So at some point during the test, you need to get both the responses that the top line is clearer and the response that the bottom line is clearer. So you need to get a reversal, you need to bracket the response. Your goal is to make the 2 lines the most equal possible. So if your patient does have an equal in between, so they say the top is clearer, and then they say equal, and then they say the bottom is clearer, you're all set because that middle equal is the final response that you want. So you would return to that equal before proceeding on to the next test. Another way to do the test is with alternate occlusion. So if your patient is struggling seeing the top and the bottom, cover one eye and then the other. So you go back and forth and you ask the patient which is clearer, right eye, left eye, and just occlude the other image as you go. The easiest situation for this test is if at some point the patient says the top line is clearer, at some point they say the bottom line is clearer, and somewhere in between they say it's equal. You just stop at the equal. If the patient doesn't report an equal between the top line being clearer and the bottom line being clearer, then you have several options. Show them the set with the top line clearer, show them the set with the bottom line clearer, and say, in which of these options are the two lines closest to equally blurry? I let my patient know that I am trying to balance the vision between your two eyes. Another thing you can do is choose the lenses that give the least amount of aniso. So between the right eye and left eye, choose your option for your equal as the one that has the least difference between the actual spherical powers between the two lenses. The third option, if you know your patient's dominant eye, is to give that dominant eye the slightly better vision. So when they say top is clearer, if the right eye is dominant, you're going to go with that as opposed to bottom is clearer if the left eye is dominant. So what do you do if you set up your distance equalization and your patient immediately reports that both those lines look equally blurry? You can't just stop there. You have to verify by bracketing. So go ahead and add a quarter plus to one eye and ask the patient which is clearer. They should say the other eye. So whichever one you put the quarter plus in front should be blurrier now. Take out that quarter plus, put a quarter plus in the other eye, and ask the patient again which one is clearer. And so they should report that the one you added the plus in front of is blurrier and the other one is clearer. At some point during the test, you need the patient to say that the top line is clearer, and then at some point during the test, you need them to say the bottom line is clearer. So if they start with an equal, you need to verify it. What happens if the patient is only seeing one line of letters? It could be that you've forgotten to open up both eyes, so one of the eyes is still occluded. It could be that they're suppressing, so you need to cover one eye and then the other to force them to break suppression. It could be that they're fusing the two targets, so in that case you need to add more vertical prism. If you get a big difference in the aniso between the 20/40 blur and the conclusion of your distance equalization, I would try the test again using alternate occlusion, and then ask the patient to pay attention to the clarity of the letters and nothing else. As with any test, if the test you're doing isn't working, do not just repeat the test without making any changes. What if the patient has unequal potential acuities? So there's more than a line of difference between the best visual acuity in the right eye versus the left eye. In this case, distance equalization is not an appropriate test to perform on that patient. You would likely be relying on your monocular findings to determine your final prescription. Record the distance equalization values, the spherical values, in the comments, and then you're going to move on to doing the binocular subjective best visual acuity. So this works exactly the same way as the monocular subjective. You're just doing it with both eyes open and moving the lenses together. The aniso found in the distance equalization should always be the same as the aniso you find in the binocular subjective. For the BSBVA, remove the prism from in front of the patient, confirm that they see one line of letters, go ahead and put up your 20/20 line, confirm that it is too blurry for them to read any of the 20/20 line. Remember that they should still be blurred. Even though you've made some changes from the 20/40 blur, if you were careful to add plus quarter diopter to the clearer eye first, and then a minus quarter to the blurrier eye, and go back and forth, never adding too much minus, they should still be blurred out so that when they see that single 20/20 line, they will not be able to read it. If they are able to read it, you need to go back and repeat this final stage of the distance refraction, meaning you need to go back to your 20/40 blur and repeat your distance equalization. Assuming when you take the prism out, they see singly and they are too blurry to read the 20/20 line, with both eyes together, you're going to slowly add minus and tell your patient to tell you when they can first read any of the letters on the 2020 line. Once they can read one or two of the letters on the 2020 line, you're going to give them that forced choice in exactly the same way as you did the MSBVA. You're just doing it with two eyes at the same time. And the endpoints are the same as with the MSBVA. Because you are going from the distance equalization to the BSBVA, the aniso that you found in the distance equalization will be the same as the aniso in the BSBVA. What is going to be due next week is the entire sequence that you have learned now on 4 patients, screenshot and recorded in Epic. You're going to do retinoscopy and take VAs. This is because if the patient is unable to respond to a subjective refraction, you are likely going to use your retinoscopy as the basis of your final prescription. Then you're going to do your 20/40 blur. Note there's no asterisk beside it, so you don't have to record it. You're going to do a spherical refinement with your bichrome. Only switch to MSBVA if your patient is unable to respond to bichrome. You're going to record those. You don't need to record VAs just yet. Then do your JCC. You're going to do an additional 20/40 blur and then repeat your monocular spherical refinement, this time using MSBVA. And then record that, and then you're going to take VAs a second time. It's important to take the VAs here because if your patient has unequal potential acuities between the two eyes, then this finding is likely to be the basis of your final prescription for that patient. You're going to do your 20/40 blur again, distance equalization, and then you're going to do your binocular subjective. And record VAs. The VAs at this point are going to be OD, OS, and OU. So the previous 2 times you take VAs, it's just OD and OS. There's no reason to do OU. But once you've done the distance equalization and the binocular subjective, you're also going to want to record the VAs OU. When you do your recording, you'll record RET as we've been doing it. And then in your final refraction, you're going to record 3 different line items. So F1 is going to be your bichrome, F2 is going to be your second MSBVA with the JCC finding, and then your final tab F3 is going to be your BSBVA. With your BSBVA, there's still not a spot for you to record your OU VAs, so please do that under the type. Please ask us if you have any questions on how to record. Once you close your tab, you should have a nice screenshot like this. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in lab next week.